They called me a burden, but this house is still mine.
You're a burden, Dad. It's time.
Christmas lights blinked, pine needles on the carpet. Laughter echoed around the table, until he tossed it, a folded mortgage slip, and said, "You have nothing left." You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name's Robert Halston. I'm 68 years old. I've lived my whole life just outside Toledo, Ohio, where you can see the rusted steel towers from the highway, like bones poking out of a frozen grave. That Christmas morning, the world outside my window looked like a postcard. Frosted sidewalks, icicles dangling like glass knives from the porch. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon rolls and strong coffee. The TV hummed with carolers in ugly sweaters. The fireplace crackled low, spreading a soft orange glow. The kind of day you think will stay gentle. I'd just refilled the eggnog. My wife's picture, 12 years gone, still stood on the mantel. I always leave her stocking hanging, a small act of loyalty nobody else notices. Dean, my grandson, had just unboxed a brand new smartwatch I'd paid for. He barely glanced my way, just muttered a flat, "Cool," and went back to scrolling whatever feed kept his eyes locked down. I told myself it didn't matter. Kids, screens, different world. Then he reached into his coat. A single folded sheet of paper slid across the table. Crisp, intentional, like a summons. "Here," he said, voice loud enough to hush the room. "Time to handle your own place, Grandpa." The laughter died instantly. Forks stopped midair. Even the twins, usually explosions of noise, froze with wrapping paper half torn in their hands. I picked up the page. It was my mortgage statement, printed from his email. The remaining balance circled in thick red ink, like a teacher grading a failed exam. I looked up at Dean, no nervous smile, no hesitation, just that cool, smug tilt of the chin. "You've got nothing left," he said. Half pity, half pride, like he was doing me a kindness by saying it out loud, and no one said a thing. Not his mother, not his sister, not even my son. Only the sound of wrapping paper and a gust of wind pressing against the old windows. That was the moment it all snapped into place. Every loan I'd signed, every check I'd written, every late bill I'd ignored so Dean could stay at that overpriced college in California. I wasn't family. I was funding. And now I had apparently reached my expiration date. The cruelest part, I had allowed it. Bit by bit, year after year, always just helping. I remembered holding Dean the night he was born. He came early during a whiteout snowstorm, my hands still black with grease from second shift at the mill. I hadn't even taken my boots off, just ran down sterile hallways until I found my daughter-in-law's room. My wife smiled through exhaustion and whispered, "You'll spoil him rotten, Bobby." I did. Private school, summer soccer camps, a used Ford when he turned 16, the tuition when his dad couldn't cover it, the credit cards when he lost his job for a bit, every emergency that landed in my lap. I never once said no. And now the boy I'd carried through blizzards was sliding foreclosure across my table like it was a Christmas card. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. He wanted me out. Out of the house I built with my own hands back in '78. Back when gas was 89 cents and I'd spend lunch breaks pouring concrete, proud just to be carving something permanent out of nothing. And the rest of them? They looked at their phones, sipped mimosas, pretended this wasn't happening. I could feel my pulse in my ears, loud as a drum, my chest tight, my throat dry, but I didn't flip the table, didn't shout. I just folded the paper back up, laid it on my plate like a dirty napkin, and stood. No one moved. No one followed me down the hall. No one asked if I was okay. I shut the bedroom door behind me, sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, hands heavy in my lap, stared at the worn carpet until minutes bled into an hour. Outside, faint voices rose and fell. More laughter. A door opened, closed. Someone turned the TV louder to drown out the quiet I left behind. That night, after the house had gone still, I grabbed my truck keys. The Chevy's engine coughed awake in the frozen dark. The heater wheezed lukewarm at best, but the cold was welcome. It kept me alert. I steered west, past the turnpike toll booths, headlights cutting through low, drifting snow. Country roads slick and silver, shuttered gas stations, grain silos looming like silent guards. And somewhere in that dark, a thought started to bloom. Slow. Dangerous. If they think I have nothing left, then they won't see what's coming. It didn't come as rage, not the hot, quick kind. It came as something cleaner, sharper. Resolve, stripped of all the begging and pleasing that had worn me down for decades. By the time I turned back toward town, the clock on the dash read 2:47 a.m. The heater finally wheezed something close to warmth. My reflection in the side window looked older, yes, but also strangely awake. Morning brought silence, snow light spilling through thin curtains. I made coffee, black, bitter, and sat at the kitchen table alone. Then I got to work, a yellow legal pad, a pen that didn't run out halfway through. I started writing. Bank files, deed records, retirement accounts, anything they might assume I'd forgotten or lost track of, anything still mine. And under it all, a single line I circled twice. My name. They could take the gifts, the years, even the roof if they were foolish enough to try, but they would not take who I am, not quietly. The day after Christmas, the house was dead quiet. No laughter, no grandkids thundering up and down the hallway, no hum of conversation carrying from the living room, just the low, uneven hum of the old refrigerator and the faint tick of the thermostat. That kind of silence that doesn't simply fill a room, it presses on your chest. They were gone before I woke. Left early, left fast. Said they had things to do. No thank you. No goodbye hug. Not even a note. Just empty coffee cups sweating in the sink and scraps of wrapping paper jammed into the kitchen trash. Like I'd hosted a party I hadn't been invited to. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the exact spot where Dean had dropped the mortgage statement. It was still there, still folded once across the middle, an ugly gray scar against the wood grain. I didn't touch it, didn't want to feel its weight again, just stared until the coffee in front of me went cold and bitter. The house smelled faintly of pine and burnt sugar cookies from yesterday. Sunlight dragged across the floor in long, pale stripes, catching on the tinsel that had fallen from the tree. Every so often the furnace clicked on with a tired sigh, like even it didn't want to be awake. Finally, I pushed my chair back. The legs groaned against the tile, and I started opening drawers, not for weapons, not for revenge, for receipts, for proof. The first one I found was buried in an old Sears shoebox under the sink. Faded carbon copies of tuition payments made out to the Ohio State University. 4 years, $67,000. My handwriting scrawled shaky but proud on every check. I could still picture the day I paid that first bill. His father had just lost his job at the tool plant. I remember the look on my son's face, humiliation mixed with quiet panic. So I clapped a hand on his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I'll make it happen." Then I went out and found 2 night janitor shifts at the middle school after I'd already retired. That same middle school where Dean once stood on stage in a spelling bee, tiny hands gripping a microphone as he spelled resilience with a grin that split his face wide. I remember mopping those same floors years later, sweat running down my back, while the echo of his childhood laughter still clung to the halls. No one ever asked how I did it. No one asked if I was okay. They just assumed I had old man money tucked away somewhere, like a magician pulling endless scarves from a hat. I dug deeper. Another box, old loan agreements, manila envelopes full of auto repairs, cell phone bills from a family plan I was still paying for, even though half the numbers weren't mine anymore. Then the credit cards, $25,000 in cosign balances, bailed out after Dean missed payments and shrugged it off as bad timing. I'd put off my own dental work, living with an aching molar for almost a year, just so his credit score wouldn't sink. And through it all, I'd kept my mouth shut. Because that's what men like me were taught to do. You take the hit. You show up anyway. You don't keep score. Until someone else does, and writes 0 next to your name. By sundown, the kitchen table was covered end to end. Paper trails, bank statements, canceled checks curling at the edges, email printouts. It looked like a crime scene. Evidence of a slow bleed I hadn't noticed while it was happening. My whole retirement, bent and reshaped to carry other people. My future, postponed indefinitely. And yet they had the audacity to tell me I had nothing left. No, I still had one thing. I had the house. They'd always joked about it back when the tone still sounded playful. When you're ready to downsize, Dad, we'll turn this into a duplex. Dean and Jess love the bay windows. We'd remodel it in a heartbeat. It's kind of outdated, but the bones are good. Bones. That word clung to me now, like they already saw me as a ghost haunting a future flip project, a body waiting to vacate. I went out to the garage. Cold hit me first, sharp enough to sting my eyes. Dust floated in thin shafts of light from a bare bulb overhead. Against the far wall sat my old tool bench. Next to it, tucked behind paint cans and a crate of nails, a fireproof lockbox waited. I knelt and hauled it out. The metal felt icy through my gloves. Spun the dial, opened it. Inside, the original deed, signed 1978, filed Lucas County. My name, my wife Linda's name. Not Dean's, not my son's, mine. I brushed my fingertips over the paper. It smelled faintly of ink and attic dust and the concrete floors I'd poured myself. That house wasn't a hand-me-down. It was a life's work, a promise I'd kept when nothing else was certain, and I was done letting it be treated like leftovers. The next morning, I dialed an old number I hadn't used in years. Barry. He'd been a real estate lawyer once before retiring out near Port Clinton. Still sharp, still blunt. The kind of guy who knew every loophole and didn't mind using them. "Halston," he said when he picked up, voice rough with sleep but brightening fast. "Been a while." "Need to talk property," I said. "Got time?" "For you?" "Always." 2 days later, we met at a diner off Route 2. One of those places untouched by time. Red vinyl booths cracked at the seams. A jukebox stuck on the same 3 Elvis songs. Smell of bacon grease soaked into every wall. Snow whipped sideways outside as trucks howled by on the highway. Inside, mugs clinked and fryers hissed. I slid the mortgage paper across the booth the way Dean had done to me. Barry unfolded it slowly, eyebrows climbing as he read. "Reverse mortgage?" he asked finally. I nodded. Started it after Linda passed. Thought, I wouldn't last this long. Barry gave a small smile, but his eyes stayed cool and sharp. "They think you're vulnerable," he said. "Think this place is already half theirs." He tapped the paper. "But it's not. Not yet." Something steadied in me at those words. He leaned in, lowering his voice over the clatter of plates. "There's a way to move this house into a living trust. Shield it. Pay off the remainder and lock the deed so tight they couldn't pry it loose with a crowbar." He scribbled on a napkin. Steps, costs, names of offices. "Paperwork's a hassle," he warned. "Might sting the wallet a bit. But once it's done, they can't touch it. Not unless you want them to." I stared at the napkin. It felt like a lifeline. For the first time in days, my lungs filled all the way. All I needed now was the will to follow through. That night, I sat by the fireplace. Documents spread across the coffee table like a battle plan. Flames licked low, throwing slow shadows up the walls. Linda's photo watched from the mantel, her smile frozen mid-laugh. "You always said I'd be too soft," I whispered to her. The words cracked halfway out. "But I think it's time I showed them just how sharp I can be." Outside, the wind rattled the porch rail. Somewhere deep in the house, a board creaked like it was listening. I reached for my checkbook. The pen felt heavy, but sure in my hand, and I began to write the first check. 2 days after the diner meeting, I found myself standing in line at the Lucas County Clerk's office, the kind of place you avoid most of your life until life leaves you no choice. It was colder inside than it was out on the street. Drafts slipped through old vents, carrying the sterile smell of toner, floor wax, and some cheap air freshener that barely masked the dust. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the flicker sharp enough to sting tired eyes. A woman in front of me argued with the clerk about a marriage license, her voice cracking with frustration. Behind me, a man tapped his boot against the linoleum, restless, sighing every few seconds, and there I was, retired, gray-haired, wearing the same flannel I'd worn for 20 winters, holding the deed to my house like it was the last rope thrown into dark water. People talk about protecting your legacy. They talk about wills, inheritances, passing things on. But they don't tell you it means standing for 3 hours with arthritis, chewing your knees, clutching papers with trembling hands, filing documents not to leave something behind, but to keep what you've already built from being stolen out from under you. I wasn't here for revenge. Not yet. I was here because my own blood had started sharpening the knife, and survival comes first. Barry had given me the map, a step-by-step I could follow, even with shaking hands. Set up a revocable living trust. Transfer the house title into it. Pay off the remaining mortgage balance, just under $29,000. Seal it. Once done, it couldn't be contested. Not unless I died without a will, and I had no intention of letting that happen. Not anymore. The plan was simple. The execution wasn't. As I shuffled forward in that government line, another memory came to me. A week before Christmas, Dean had stopped by, said he was checking on me. That was his phrase, friendly enough on the surface. But the first thing he did was open my fridge, pulled out 2 beers, didn't ask, sat himself on my couch, feet up on the coffee table, remote in hand like he owned the place. He looked around at the living room, my living room, the walls Linda and I painted, the curtains she'd sewn herself, and said casually, "You know, when you're ready, we could Airbnb this place out, make a killing." He'd said we, not you. Not even I could help you. We, as if I was already gone, as if my house was just a property portfolio waiting for his signature. I didn't react then, just smiled weakly, went to refill his glass, pretended not to notice the shift in his tone. But standing in that clerk's office, the weight of that word crushed me. I remembered every slip of his tongue now, every time he asked if I'd updated the will, every text that began with quick question, "Can you spot me $300?" Every silence when I said no. For years I thought I was helping him, but I wasn't. I was enabling a man who measured family in transactions. And the second I had nothing left to hand over, he decided I no longer counted. That night, I laid it all out across the dining room table. The same table where he'd slid the mortgage statement across like a gauntlet. Legal forms, bank printouts, trust documents Barry had pointed me to, a yellow notepad scrawled with the tally of what I had left. $42,730 in retirement savings, $3,210 in checking, 1 paid-off Ford truck, reliable but rusting at the wheel wells, and that $29,000 mortgage balance, the anchor still tied to my ankle. I scratched through every expense, every timeline, until the pen dug grooves in the page. By morning, the plan was as solid as wet concrete setting under winter air. It wasn't easy. I had to close 2 savings CDs I'd held since 1995. Watch the bank teller click through the forms without even lifting her eyes, like she wasn't erasing 2 decades of careful saving with a few strokes on a screen. I called Medicare, rearranged premiums. I even paused one of my prescriptions. Not dangerous, but enough to make the nights ache harder than they should. Every choice stung. Every cut felt like carving from bone. but each decision was a brick in the wall I was building. Not against Dean, not even against my son. Between them and my home. The check itself, I mailed it with hands that didn't want to let go. Sent it certified mail through the same post office where I used to send care packages to Dean in college. Watched the clerk stamp it, slide it away like it wasn't carrying half my life. Then I tracked it every day like a lifeline. Watched it ping Cincinnati, then Columbus, then finally delivered. 3 days later, confirmation landed in my mailbox. A sterile letter, nothing poetic, nothing dramatic, just a line of numbers ending with a balance. De Beardors. I stood in the kitchen holding that letter, the late afternoon sun cutting across the floor. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something like oxygen hit the bottom of my lungs. The house was mine, free, clear, and now sealed inside a trust with only one name on it, mine. I should have felt safe, should have felt untouchable. But fate doesn't hand out victories clean. The phone rang 2 days later. Margaret, my neighbor 2 doors down. She'd known Linda, brought us pies at Christmas. Works in insurance now. Knows everybody's business whether she means to or not. "Hey, Bob," she said. "Listen, I overheard something at the gym. Your grandson was talking to someone about refinancing your house. Thought he already had a claim on it." Her voice was careful, like she didn't want to be the one to break glass. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I just said, "Thanks, Margaret," and hung up. So that was it. He wasn't just circling. He was already measuring the walls, counting the windows, thinking of rugs, profits, renovations, my house, my work, my years. That night, I sat on the porch with a wool blanket wrapped around my shoulders, a glass of bourbon sweating in my hand. Snow fell soft and relentless, drifting down like ash from a dying fire. And I decided, this wasn't just about protecting the house anymore. This wasn't just about legal filings and documents in a box. This was about the moment, the one where he realized he had never owned me. Not my name, not my years, not the roof I'd raised beam by beam with Linda, not the foundation poured in sweat and calluses. None of it. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I didn't storm over there and pound on his door. I just sat in the cold, waited, because I knew there would be a next time. There always was. Another ask, another assumption, another moment they thought I'd fold like a worn-out wallet. And when that moment came, I would be ready, and they would never forget it. The following Sunday, they came over as if nothing had happened. Dean, his parents, his girlfriend, the one with the perfect nails that clicked against her phone and a laugh that could rattle the windows. They said they wanted to check in on me. They brought peace offerings. Bagels in a paper bag still damp with steam. Orange juice sweating through the cardboard. A tray of hash browns from McDonald's. Grease bleeding into the paper. As if a little breakfast could patch over what they'd buried just a week ago. I played along. I set the table, poured coffee, smiled at the right moments, nodded when they talked about the weather, about Dean's job hunt, about the girlfriend's promotion. No one asked how I'd slept since Christmas. No one mentioned the mortgage paper. They assumed it had blown over. They assumed I'd swallowed the humiliation whole. They had no idea what was coming. I had already filed the trust, already received the title transfer confirmation, notarized and stamped in official black ink. The house was legally protected. Now, the mortgage, gone. Every receipt, every proof of payment, every timestamp was printed, hole-punched, and tucked into a heavy black binder that sat ready in the hallway closet. I had spent nights building this record, line by line, dollar by dollar. It wasn't anger that built it. It was clarity. Dean scrolled on his phone while smirking, leg bouncing under the table. The smell of burnt hash browns mixed with the faint scent of pine from the fading Christmas tree. He didn't even glance at me until he decided to. Then he looked up, voice casual but sharp as a hook. "So hey, Grandpa, I've been talking to a couple mortgage guys. We could help you cash out that equity if you want." He smiled the way people smile when they're already halfway to the finish line, when they think the race is theirs and the tape will part cleanly across their chest. I nodded slowly, kept my face blank. "Why don't we talk about that?" I said. Then I stood and walked down the hall. No one asked where I was going. No one even paused their chewing. When I came back, the black binder was in my hands. I set it down in the center of the table. The sound echoed louder than it should have, paper on wood like a gavel hitting once. I didn't rush. I opened it slow, page by page, letting each sheet breathe. Bank printouts, tuition checks, auto repair invoices, cell phone bills, credit card statements, deed transfers, trust certificates, the notarized final page from the Lucas County Clerk's office, stamped with fresh authority. I turned the binder around and faced it toward Dean. "This," I said quietly, "is every dollar I spent on you." Dean blinked. His smirk twitched. Then he gave a nervous laugh, the kind people use when they're not sure if the joke just turned on them. "Grandpa, what is this?" I didn't raise my voice. Didn't blink either. "This," I said, tapping the page, "is the record of every tuition payment I made, every car I fixed, every cell bill, every loan I co-signed and paid when you didn't." I flipped to the next section, slow as turning a blade. "And this," I said, "is the deed transfer. The house is now in a trust, fully paid, legally locked. You will never touch a brick of it." The air went heavy. His mother gasped, hand flying to her chest. His girlfriend stopped mid-bite, jaw hanging open, fries forgotten. Dean's face drained pale, lips parting like a glitching processor that had just lost its script. You don't trust me?" he stammered. I met his eyes and didn't look away. "You told me I had nothing left," I said softly. "Now you do?" He stood fast, the chair legs screeching against the tile. Tried to puff himself taller than he was. "This is messed up, man. I've been helping you. You needed me." I lifted my brows, slow and deliberate. "Really? I needed you to take my mortgage and wave it in my face on Christmas morning?" His father, my son, shifted uncomfortably, cleared his throat. "Dad, maybe we can talk about this?" "No." My voice was steady. "You all had your chance to talk." I closed the binder with a sharp snap that made everyone flinch. Conversation's over. It had taken me 30 days to dismantle the fantasy they'd built. 30 days to file the paperwork, to move the house into a trust, to pay off every cent of debt, to wall off every exit they thought they had. They hadn't seen a single move coming, because people like Dean, they only respect power when it finally slaps them across the face. A week later, Margaret called me again. I was on the porch, sanding a loose rail when the phone buzzed in my pocket. "Bob," she said, voice brimming with quiet satisfaction, "you'll want to know this. Your grandson's been running his mouth, trying to pitch that Airbnb idea to a buddy in real estate. The guy checked records at the clerk's office. Found the trust." She paused, waiting. I just chuckled once. Low. "Good to know, Margaret. Thank you." Word spread fast after that. Dean hadn't just been cut off. He'd been embarrassed. The guy who bragged he was going to flip his grandpa's house? Turned out he didn't own so much as a floorboard. The next time I saw him, his shoulders were rounded, his eyes avoiding mine like they couldn't risk contact. He muttered something about boundaries and everyone makes mistakes. I didn't gloat, didn't even smile. I just nodded once. "Some mistakes cost a few bucks," I told him quietly. "Others cost you a legacy." He didn't answer, just stood there in his expensive jacket, suddenly looking very small. Then he left without another word. That evening I changed the locks, not because I feared him coming back, but because some doors, once closed, should never open again. When I finished, I poured myself a bourbon and sat on the porch steps. The winter air was sharp but clean. My breath floated like thin smoke in the fading light. No headlights coming down the drive, no shadows lingering at the edge of the yard, just quiet, just peace. Snow hissed softly under my tires as I left their street behind. Headlights stretched out across I-75, a silver ribbon unraveling into the dark, the kind you follow when you're done looking back. It was quiet. Ohio, quiet. Just the hum of the engine, the weak rattle of the old heater, the dashboard glowing green like an aging heartbeat. The warmth that filled the cab had nothing to do with forgiveness. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't heavy. It was earned. After the confrontation, I stopped answering their calls. Every voicemail went to static. At first, they tried guilt. Dad, we didn't mean it like that. Then anger. This isn't fair. You're cutting family out. Then silence. Icy, calculated, meant to punish. It didn't matter, because I wasn't playing anymore. Not the OTM, not the backup plan, not the placeholder, until the will came through. I had drawn a line, and on my side of it the air felt cleaner, lighter, breathable. Around Toledo, word travels in soft little currents. Not cruel, just curious. The hardware store cashier hears something at the diner. The diner waitress tells her cousin. Her cousin knows someone at the bank. Margaret, ever the messenger, told me how quickly it spread. Dean, the guy who bragged about his tech job in California, who posted Napa wine tours and Silicon Valley brunches, was suddenly that guy, the one who tried to pry a house from under his grandfather, and lost. Nobody said it to his face, she told me, but they knew. Funny how fast admiration turns to pity when people see what's underneath the polished photos and filtered smiles. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about looking in the mirror and finally recognizing the man looking back. Not the exhausted caretaker, not the dependable wallet, not the strong, silent type who swallowed disrespect to keep the peace, but the man who finally said, "No more. I hadn't done this to hurt them. I had done it to reclaim myself, to remember who I was before decades of small asks and quiet sacrifices carved me hollow." There's power in that moment, when you stop apologizing for existing. I started fixing things around the house again. Slowly, almost ceremonially. I tightened the loose banister on the stairs, sanded and stained until it felt solid under my hand. Retiled the upstairs bathroom, where Linda once hung those ridiculous yellow duck towels that used to make me groan but secretly smile. Hung her favorite photograph back above the fireplace, the one from Coney Island, 1982, where she wore that sun hat and laughed so hard I thought she might fall over. I started living again. Sunday mornings became mine. Jazz on the old record player, Ella Fitzgerald filling the halls. I taught myself to make sourdough from a one-handed baker in Nebraska on YouTube. Watched his quiet joy and thought, maybe there's life left in learning new things. Some mornings I woke before dawn and just sat in the living room, watching gray light spread across the walls. No bills stacked, accusingly. No phone buzzing with another favor. No weight sitting on my chest. Just air. Just space. I saw Dean once more. Pure accident. It was at the hardware store on Monroe Street, early morning. I was buying new cabinet hinges. He was in the returns line, holding a cheap showerhead and looking thinner than I remembered. His face had that brittle sheen of someone who's been humbled but hasn't learned yet. He spotted me first. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I gave a simple nod. Nothing more. He didn't nod back, just turned slightly, gaze slipping away like a man trying to make himself invisible. Shame is heavy. It makes people look down. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. And there's a difference. If you give someone everything, and they still treat you like you're disposable. That's not love. That's control. And the thing about control is, once you take it back, they don't know what to do with themselves, because the only power they ever had was the power you handed them. I still take the old back roads sometimes. Through Perrysburg, past the frozen lake where Linda and I once parked the truck to watch the Tigers play on scratchy AM radio, steam curling from our thermoses, past the grain silos silvered with age, standing against the wind like stubborn old men. The truck's still running, and so am I, not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but because the road ahead belongs to me now, and I'm driving it on my terms. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.